I'm pleading everyone to help India. But the question is it helping India, or is the question helping ourselves? Our world has completely changed in last 15 months. But is it really changed? And that's the conversation I want to have with Ashmeet Sidana. Ashmeet, welcome to our show.
Thank you, Sanjiv. It's a pleasure to be here, and I wish we were discussing something under better circumstances, but that's where we find ourselves today.
So Ashmeet, for our audience, I just wanted to tell them a little bit about you. So Ashmeet is a dear friend of mine, Stanford graduate, BITS Pilani, and he has done a lot of amazing work. Interesting thing is his company, Engineering Capital, is not like any other traditional VC firm I found. He has a knack for finding the interesting technologies. He invests into early stage company. So the reason I invited him is so we can really talk about what Silicon Valley can do. So Ashmeet, before we jump to really deep conversation, let's talk a little bit about the state of affairs here. I looked around different data set, including CDC, including Gov data, health data, hundreds other places. And I find some very interesting data set. On one end, in India, we are struggling with the vaccination issues. People are not getting vaccine. Huge, huge problem right now. There are queues of 5,000, 10,000 people at one places. And in America, we have less than 42% eligible adults vaccinated. And we are talking about opening, where CDC is saying that 70% plus people, if they are vaccinated, we may have herd immunity. We have countries like Bhutan, where 92% eligible adult got vaccination in just 2 weeks. Population of that country is, of course, 700,000. 500,000 people were eligible roughly, and they got vaccination done. So question I have for you is it the desire problem or a supply chain problem?
What a great way to frame it, Sanjiv, because that's sort of the way we think of it as engineers. You know, is it demand? Is it supply? Where is the logistics? Where is this problem? The reality is that we call it a pandemic because it does affect everything in the world. And it is all of the above. Depending on where you are, the problem of COVID is going to affect all aspects of our lives, and therefore all types of problems are created by it. In India today, we are seeing shortage of oxygen, not because we don't know how to make oxygen, or not because we don't know how to supply oxygen, or even because India itself doesn't have enough oxygen. The reality is India is one of the very large producers of oxygen because of our wonderful steel industry. But the distribution has been difficult. We were not ready for that distribution. That's just one small example of where all of these problems come about. On the other extreme, we have people who don't want to accept the vaccine, even when it is available to them. And so we are reallocating vaccines within the US itself. So this is a global problem, and all of the above are applicable depending on which side, which lens you look at it. In India, we have this wonderful saying about the blind man and the elephant. And you can describe the elephant differently based on what part of the elephant you touch. And so the pandemic is an elephant, and depending on what part of the pandemic you touch, you will get a different view.
So let's deep dive a little bit about the data, because you and me both love data. We believe with data, we can solve the problem, not with AI or anything. If we don't have the right data, we will be solving the wrong problem. So the current data is less than 9% of the world is vaccinated. Countries like, there's one country, I'm slipping the name, they have around 80% vaccination done. 80% of their population is vaccinated, and they are doing quarantine right now, even after 80%, because we are discovering this double mutation, this new mutation. And complex thing is these new mutations will be continued and will continue to happen. So the challenge I am seeing it, the world is not ready to look at the data. And the problem is, since they are not looking at the data, they are so concerned about everything else, but they are not concerned about their neighbors. They are not concerned about being a good citizen. I'm seeing this vaccination is a sign of good citizenship. Do you agree with that, or do you think it is too far-fetched?
Today in the US, to attend kindergarten, you have to get your child vaccinated with the basic vaccines. We can solve this. But at a bigger level, Sanjeev, if I can step back to the way you framed it, that this is really a data problem in some ways. I completely agree with you. This is data about who is vaccinated, who is not vaccinated, who is positive, who is not positive. But at a deeper level, also, what is this virus? What is the RNA, DNA that we are trying to solve? And if you look at the role of Silicon Valley, which has obviously been one of the seminal areas where this research was conducted. I mean, Genentech, one of the founding companies, approaching biology from a genetics perspective, was founded right here in the Bay Area. So data is at the heart of this problem. Data is also at the heart of the solution to this problem. And we will be able to solve it. We just have to work together as a country, as a nation, as a world, as one single globe. All of us are in it together. And so when people suffer in India, that translates to all of us. It translates to the whole world. It's very unfortunate that we saw Australia ban Australian citizens from coming back from India to Australia. Obviously a very extreme measure that they took. So when one person is not well, everyone is not well. And we have to take care of everyone in the world with COVID.
So going back to the data, Ashmeet, you are vaccinated, I am vaccinated. But on the data side, nobody has done my blood analysis yet. Nobody has done your blood analysis, your saliva analysis. So there is no data aggregation happening at a mass scale at all. So question I have, can Silicon Valley help in that? So we can ensure and we can make people comfortable that, hey, it's not. Can we create more of a crowdsource movement? Because we can blame government, we can blame a lot of people, but that's not how the world works. It's not people for government. We elected these people. If we join hands and we create this data set, don't you think there is a way we can help humanity?
While you and I have not been tested for saliva or any kind of a mass test, one of the powers of data is that if you apply science to it, you don't have to test everyone to make very reliable predictions about what we are doing. That's the power of statistics. That's the power of mathematics. So, we can get a statistically valid sample and we can be very confident of the results without having to test every individual, without having to do the effort and the cost of bringing everybody in. And to the science today is pretty well advanced. Another way in which the data is going to help us is the mutants and the variations that you've talked about the virus, right? The reality is some of our most advanced companies like Moderna, Pfizer, etc., are already working on these variants. Not only have they tested the existing vaccines, but they already have booster doses that they are working on and that they are testing to solve this problem. So data is part of the problem. It is also part of the solution over here.
So how can Silicon Valley help? How can we help? Because the problem is, yes, we can send oxygen concentrators to India, which we are doing. Next week, we are sending some. Yes, we are doing fundraiser, but this is a problem of 7.3 billion people. This is not the problem of 1.3 billion people. We can't take India and isolation, hey, only the 1.3 billion people, you mark a territory and they say nobody moves out of it. And then if you live, die, that's your problem. And rest of us are not impacted. That's not how the world works. We know that. So what can we do as a Silicon Valley entrepreneur or technologist, maybe with data, maybe with science, maybe with technology, or any of your company doing something interesting in that area?
I think Silicon Valley can have a huge impact. And in fact, it already is having a huge impact on COVID. At the lowest level, we are responding to the emergency. So sending a donation of an oxygen concentrator to India, that's responding to an emergency. And hopefully we can go and save some lives and help some people. So we've clearly done that. At the next level up, Silicon Valley is part of the infrastructure which makes our response to this vaccine more efficient. For example, we can schedule vaccines, we can deal with logistics, we can give people digital passports, we can track who has been infected, who has not, etc. So Silicon Valley is at the very heart of enabling those things, and technologies that you may not think of as something relevant to a vaccine or to COVID are at the heart of efforts. Just simple things like databases, data networks, the ability to communicate with smartphones is at the heart of those solutions. It would have been much harder to implement something like this 10 or 20 years ago if everybody didn't have a smartphone in their hand. Imagine how we would transfer the information. Imagine how we would contact people, inform them, schedule appointments. So even simple things over there. So at the lowest level, respond to the emergency. At a slightly higher level, become part of the infrastructure to enable solutions, to enable other people to work. At an even higher level, I mentioned Genentech, a company that we don't talk about often over here, but it is a homegrown Silicon Valley startup, the very first genomic startup in the world.
Yeah.
They, of course, went after the problem of insulin, and what a huge impact they had on the world in terms of changing how we produce insulin and diabetes, which is also a problem very prevalent in India. I believe...
So coming back to the same question, Ashmeet, because we really want to help.
Yeah.
The problem I'm saying is we are calling it as problem of India. And what I'm trying to say, it is not a problem of India. It's a global problem. In Brazil, you have 14% people vaccinated. In Mexico, we have only 10% people vaccinated. In so many countries, in Thailand, less than 1% people, as per the data I got, I may not be sure, but it's 1% people vaccinated. So how a country like Bhutan get 92% eligible people vaccinated, how a country like Thailand get only 1%? This is very baffling to me. And I believe, is it the problem of vaccine availability? Is it the problem of the logistics? What is really going on?
Sanjiv, I love your passion and the care to solve this problem, but let's first recognize that just vaccines is not a complete solution. Even if we have vaccines, we have to deal with variants, mutants coming up, and even with the existing vaccine, there can be a pass-through where this can happen. And of course, there are all the logistics, etc., limitations that you described. And that's why the framework I was building up was more about at what stage of the problem do you want to attack it, and how long do you want to form a solution. For example, an oxygen concentrator solves the problem for an hour or a day or at most
3 days.
Yeah. A vaccine, I believe, will solve the problem for months or maybe years. Nobody believes it is a complete solution. And I completely agree with you. This is not an India problem. This is not a problem or an opportunity that Bhutan has solved. Even Bhutan, even Seychelles, even Israel, companies which have very high vaccination rates today, they are part of the problem and they are part of the solution. That is why we use the word pandemic. It is worldwide. It crosses every person. We are all part of the solution and we are all part of the problem. That's just how it's going to work. And because Silicon Valley is such a jewel, it is such a powerful resource, both in terms of the computer technology and in terms of genomics, we are going to be at the heart of this solution.
So what should we do? Should we form a task force where we combine the best of the best brain on our end? You and me have access to tons of amazing people, or do something else?
I think every person...
Because we can't sit quiet, man.
Yes. And I think every person needs to choose for himself or herself how they want to help.
Mm-hmm.
In what fashion they feel they are best equipped to help. If nothing else, you can be supporting the movement for someone else. Let's go distribute oxygen concentrators. I have a friend from high school. She is starting to distribute food, because people also need food if they are not well.
Huge problem.
So, you don't think of food as a solution to a pandemic, but it is an essential requirement. And I believe she is doing God's work. She is helping people in a very good way. So at the simplest level, anything is better than nothing. Do something to help the problem, as long as you are making a positive contribution. Then think, what is the highest force? What is the highest leverage that you can bring to the problem? If you are a genomics researcher, then it would be a waste of your time to use your resources to distribute food. You really should be thinking about how to solve this in a long-term, permanent way. If you are an executive like you and me, perhaps we can form task forces, perhaps we can mobilize people, we can leverage them together to do that. I'm not a biologist, so it's not fruitful for me to try to solve the biology of a vaccine, but I do have access to resources. I do have access to the organization, just like you, all of us. And so we can leverage those and help them. And so the way I describe it is anything is better than nothing. Do what you believe has the highest leverage to help this problem, because it is a long-term problem which is not going away overnight anytime soon. And all of the above is required.
I was hoping better answers. 4 months ago, I was talking about, let's talk about the future in post-pandemic world. I never thought, Ashmeet, that you and me will be sitting here today after 4 months and literally mourning the deaths of the people we knew personally and asking the world to step up, not to just help India, to help themselves too, because this is not going anywhere soon. We all know now, we all realize it.
So Sanjeev, I agree with you that this is not going away in the sense that we cannot eliminate this virus because it has been distributed so widely and because it replicates so efficiently. We cannot eliminate it. But I am an optimist. I believe in human ingenuity. I believe that we will find a new normal. I believe that our children are going to grow up in a better world than we have grown up in. And you just have to look at the long arc of history. You know, our parents lived in a much more primitive world where things like smallpox, things like typhoid were fatal. Today, we don't worry about smallpox. We don't worry about polio. And just like that, I believe we will live in a world. Now, I don't say that it's going to happen next week or next month. And yes, it will be a gradual transformation. It won't be a switch that you can, flick on and will just be gone. No, that's not going to happen. Let's be realistic. Let's be practical and realize that this is going to be a long, slow, gradual, and I'm sorry to say painful, expensive path to get to that, but we will have a good future.
So if I ask you that, do you have a challenge for our audience? What will that be?
My challenge is to imagine this future, post-pandemic future of the world, and then let's go create that future. My challenge to you is, what can you do to enable the creation of this future? But it starts by first imagining it. In this case, we have to imagine what world can be like, where this virus is not going away. It's not disappearing from the world. So how do we manage it? How do we control it? How do we eliminate it in such a way that we can still give each other a hug when we have weddings? We can still have birthday parties where children can frolic, without worrying about masks and social distancing, where we can still have those human-to-human connections, which I think is frankly what defines us as humans. We want to be connected. We want to sit next to each other. That is going to happen. I'm also an optimist. We will do that. And that is going to be part of our future. Now we just have to get there from here by filling in those intermediate steps, which will include vaccines for sure, but it will also include new inventions that you and I can't even imagine today that will be created to make that happen.
I so agree with you, and I'm really looking forward for that future. I hope soon, because we have lost a lot of lives to COVID-19. I don't want to lose humanity, and I want all of us to be united against COVID. We need that collaboration. And this time, Ashmeet, I believe we need very different level of collaboration. The collaboration has to be at every single level. And I don't know how to do it, but that's the challenge for our audience. Join hands, figure out a way, think of some short-term solution as Ashmeet has suggested, but let's work on long-term. Let's figure out a way, how can we build better medicine, better healthcare system, better society. So where we are not quarantined, where we are not isolated, where we can walk freely and still have resolved these challenges. Any parting thoughts, Ashmeet?
No, Sanjeev, I think you framed it so beautifully. Let's be together. We are social beings. We want to be together. And I'm confident we will be together. We only have to solve these things one step at a time. So absolutely. And you are doing your part by encouraging people, by communicating with them and showing them this path to the future, and even reducing the loneliness that exists in the world. So each one of us will contribute in their own little way, and you can fill an ocean with a few, if everybody contributes one drop to that. And that's the way the world has always worked, and it will continue to work.
Thank you very much, Ashmeet. Once again, thank you very much to all our listeners. Please do send us your questions, suggestion, anything you have. I am available on Instagram, Sanjiv Goyal Futurist. You can message me on Facebook or any other place you prefer. Thanks again. Thanks, Ashmeet.
Thank you, Sanjeev.